So hopefully by this time you've listened to me read chapter 2 of Ghost. Now students sometimes get a shock when they get to chapter 2. Chapter 1 is nice and short, a lot into it. Chapter 2 and chapter 3 considerably longer, so this is where you can start to flag a bit and miss important things. Chapter 2 is actually an important chapter in Ghost as well, because we learn a lot more about Castle Cranshaw and his interactions with other people. Some of them healthy, some of them not so healthy, to be honest. While chapter 1 depicts him as a victim, chapter 2 points to how that victimization may have impacted his personality, both positively and negatively. At the start of the chapter, Castle sees a running team in the park. Immediately we sense his distance, both physically and metaphorically, from those runners. He doesn't sit with them. His school lacks a track team, and even if it had one, he said he would not try out for the sport. He declares basketball is his sport. Curiously, he's never actually played basketball. Immediately we again get a sense of Castle as an outsider. He stops at his local court on his walk home to see if he can pick up a game, but no one ever picked me because the old heads don't like running with kids my age. Seems like a bit of an excuse, doesn't it? Next we see more allusions to famous athletes. Remember, allusion with an A is a reference to someone or something famous in culture or sport or literature. Castle clearly admires the basketball star LeBron James. He was interested enough in running to research the fastest man in the world in his go-to, the Guinness Book of Records. But he's dismissive of Usain Bolt, partly because of his father never watched running on TV. Usain Bolt at that time held the world record for the 100 meters. It's since been broken, but he was a pretty famous runner from Jamaica. Again, we have an insight into Ghost's complex relationship with his father. He hates him for what he did, but he does value his viewing habits. You know, he didn't watch running, so it's not important. Chapter 2 introduces us to Coach Brody for the first time. While Brody will become a father figure to Castle, first appearances are not particularly encouraging. Coach looks like a turtle with a chipped tooth, according to Castle. We're introduced to Sonny, who is already slacking off. We find out the team is called the Defenders, and Coach has a high regard for the team as one of the best youth teams in the city. Castle is not so impressed. He's more interested in how sunflower seeds get stuck to his tongue. However, the weird-looking kid, Lou, catches his attention. Ghost describes how Mr. Charles looks like James Brown if James Brown was white. Lou's face, however, looks like a black person's, but he's white. In other words, Mr. Charles is a white man who looks like a famous black singer, while Lou is African-American kid who is white in appearance. We later learn due to albinism, which is a condition that affects skin pigmentation. All right. Ghost is interested in Lou because he's decked out in the flyest gear. Fresh Nike running shoes and a full-body skin-tight suit. Castle notes he's like a superhero. Clearly Castle sees Lou as glamour that he's lacking in his own impoverished life. Furthermore, he's fast. Ghost is impressed, but he plays it cool. I was just happy something unboring was finally happening, but definitely impressed enough to stop sorting sunflower seeds in my mouth until it was done. He says, sunflower seeds, as we mentioned in chapter 1, are this important symbol in the book that Ghost measures other things or people against. Castle is less impressed with Sonny, who's very slow. Reynolds uses hyperbole and a simile here. Sonny is slow, like his shoes weighed a ton, or his bones were heavy or something. Mr. Charles might have even burned him up, and he's like 1,000 years old. Ghost says, reverting to more hyperbole. All right, hyperbole is when you say something that's over the top. Obviously, we know Mr. Charles is not really 1,000 years old. Ghost is also impressed with Patina, another one of the runners, who's fast and passive and Coach compliments her. I could tell she was no joke, he says. We already sense an early rivalry here between Ghost and Lou. Castle picks up on Coach saying Lou's the one to beat, which was kind of pissing me off. because it made me think of this kid Brandon at school who was always picked on me. His comments denote both Lou and Brandon as antagonists, characters who oppose the protagonist, Ghost. However, we later realise that their characters are very different, and Brandon and Lou do develop in different ways. At this point, Ghost does something very unusual and plucky. He steps away from the security of the sunflower seeds that are piled up like a mountain of dead flies around his feet, rolls his jeans up, and gets ready to run against Lou. Although Castle is introduced to us as a victim, this is a pretty bold and gutsy move. Certainly not something I would have ever done at school, even if I had been good at running. Needless to say, Coach Turtleface is not impressed. He tells Ghost he missed the tryouts the previous week. You know, most kids would have walked off and said, okay, I'm sorry, but this is not the case with Ghost. Ghost just stands his ground against the sternness of Coach. He just stands there on the track. It's needless to say, Coach Turtleface, as I say, is not particularly impressed. Ghost gets some abuse from Lou, who tells him he's pretending to be a runner. He's not serious. He's not a real runner. Coach relents and gives Ghost one run and tells him to make himself scarce. This is serious business, he tells him. So obviously Coach is hoping he'll just go away. Lou tells him he'll get smoked, but Ghost is unfazed. Why should I be unfazed by some milk-faced running boy, he thinks, once again referring to Lou's white appearance. Against all expectations, Ghost matches Lou's pace, even though he doesn't have the flyest gear. He's running in his old jeans. And Coach is not even sure who won. At this point, there's a curious role reversal. Ghost said he ran to make a point, and then he just wants to walk off. It wasn't like I wanted to be part of the little club, he says dismissively. Coach clearly has other ideas. He does want Ghost to be part of the club, and he doggedly follows Ghost. He asks him what team he runs for, and for his name. When Castle tells him everybody calls him Ghost, he actually means nobody. Like so many other things, this nickname and this identity goes back to the fateful night where his father tried to shoot him. When he arrived at Mr. Charles's store with his mother, Mr. Charles looked at him like he'd seen a couple of ghosts. Coach is also stunned by this nickname, but not as stunned as when Ghost turns down running for the Defenders. Remember, Coach has built his whole life around the Defenders. He thinks they're great, and Ghost is just like, nah. Coach is pretty persistent. He overcomes Ghost's dubious explanation that his sport is basketball, as well as Ghost's more realistic concerns that his mother will not allow him on the team. After practice, everybody meets up and acts like a family. It makes Ghost feel a little bit better about the whole scene and Coach, and he's possibly yearning for a missing element in his life, although Reynolds doesn't say as much. That family connection. Coach drives a taxi as his day job. He offers to drive Ghost home to talk to his mother. They drive to Ghost's neighborhood, Glass Manor, which is clearly down at heel. Here, Reynolds gives an important description of Ghost's perceived disadvantage that really shapes his character. I was used to people treating me funny when your clothes are 2 sizes too big and you got on no-name sneakers and your mother cuts your hair. You get used to treating you funny, he says. So we already see that chip he has on his shoulder, all right, to use an idiom. Coach knows where Glass Manor is, and he does not look down on him, which is the indicator of how he's going to become a positive role model later on in Ghost's life. When they drive past Ghost's mother as she's walking on the sidewalk, she's understandably suspicious about why her son is in a cab, and she's not particularly won over at first. Ghost, too, seems skeptical, realizing he has seen the line, "Mom, your son has potential," in just about every sports and movie he's watched. When he says, when Coach says Castle could be a serious problem, Ghost's mother seizes on a more negative connotation of the word problem, alluding to his less than stellar school record. Kaz already is a serious problem. He needs to focus on school, not sport, she tells Coach pretty plainly. However, Coach is not deterred here, whereas a lot of people would be. He strikes a hard bargain with Ghost's mother. He says that Ghost will be on the team if he messes up once at school. He'll be thrown off the team, and he'll make sure he does his homework every day. So that's a pretty high bar. We find out later on when we find out, just what Ghost is like at school. So chapter 2 is an important one in getting to know the main character. Although he shows courage in running against Lou, much of this chapter is defined by Ghost's attitude to others. He challenges Lou because he sees him as a pretty boy in flash gear, while he's a nobody in no-name sneakers. Therefore, his anger and resentment towards others really defines him rather than a positive desire to show his strength. So we do see a lot of Ghost's insecurities in this chapter. Thanks for listening. I hope you do subscribe to my channel.